Alright, thank you for watching. This is another Kent Hovind debate review. Kent Hovind debated a man named Alan Smith, who apparently makes a lot of comments on Kent Hovind's videos. And the subject was the age of the Earth. The format of the debate was no moderator, using internet technology to make the connection and do the debate instead of being in the same room. Alan Smith, when he was Kent gave him the chance to go first, and one thing Kent suggested or idea Kent had on the list of things Kent said he could talk about was what he does for work. He said his job is neither here nor there. He did mention it, but yeah, that really isn't that important to the debate. Let's see. He accused Kent's comment sections of being one-sided. He doesn't have a problem with the Bible, he claims. He claims people who believe a 6,000-year-old Earth are willingly ignorant. And the old Earth and Bible being true are not contradictory. People can believe both. Let's see, Kento pointed out there are a lot of historical records that only go back 4,000 to 5,000 years. Those are the oldest records we have. That's one evidence that Kent Hovind pointed out for a young Earth. And then Alan Smith made his opening statement after the introduction, the actual presentation, the meat of it. He claimed that eyewitness tests are the worst way. Eyewitness testimony is the worst way to find out anything. Wow. Strongly disagree there. No, if somebody saw something and they're telling you about it, that's a good piece of evidence. It's a good way to find out about things. Let's see, Alan Smith doesn't trust the Bible's age, what the Bible says about the Earth's age, or the New Testament's echoing of the Old Testament, because it was written by many eyewitnesses hundreds of years after the thing supposedly happened, according to him. I disagree on that. He claims DNA evidence is even better than eyewitness testimony about the age of things. So he's claiming DNA evidence is the proof of billions of years. And he says radiometric dating methods is even better than some book written by people. Something that was written 4,000 years ago, or man writing something about 4,000 years. 99.9% of animals are extinct, and he claimed that's a proof of. I don't see how that proves the old Earth or anything like that. There's no room for, the evidence doesn't leave any room for a young Earth interpretation, according to him. He claimed the age of the Earth is not evolution, or evolution is not the age of the Earth, and doesn't care about it. Let's see. He claims if you can't trust... Alan Smith made a false logical fallacy. He said if you can't trust the radiometric dating methods and all these dating methods that supposedly prove billions of years, if you can't trust those, you can't trust anything about science. No, he's making a false analogy or comparison. You can trust that a certain amount of copper wire will let a certain amount of electricity go through, because that's very different than, and you can trust that this medicine will help you with your medical problem, because that's things that are really being tested using the scientific method. Whereas the radiometric dating methods, don't use the same rigor as other things. He claimed that even though you can find examples of radiometric dating methods not working, like we know how old certain rock from a volcano is because the volcano went off when the volcano erupted, in other words, when people were there to see it and record it. So we know how old the rock is, and the radiometric methods get the wrong date. He said that doesn't disprove the whole theory. No, I'd say it does. If you know how old something is and your method doesn't match up with what you know from, then the method isn't working. um, yeah, he came up with a watch analogy. Just because there are some watches in the world that are broken doesn't mean that you can't tell what time it is. Bad analogy. See, the watch that's not working, it still uses the right technique. You just need to get the right parts working in there. That's different than, doing the potassium to argon dating method on a rock that we know came out of a volcano 30 years ago or 2,000 years ago, and getting hundreds of thousands or millions of years. Very different. He accused Kent Hovind of not giving the context when Kent Hovind quotes the dating methods, examples of when dating methods got really bad dates. We know how old something is because it was an animal that was alive, killed right before it was tested, or this rock is from a volcano that we know when it went off. He claimed there's some context Kent wasn't giving. No, Kent's not right about everything, but when he's giving these examples of radiometric testing, dating techniques not working, he's giving context. Let's see, you talked about the decay chain. We start out with uranium, we end up with lead, with all these steps, rubidium, strontium on the way down. He claims if we find all that, that proves that's very certain. He claims fossils lack C14. And that's proof, according to him. There's no DNA in dinosaurs, he says. Well, there has been soft tissue found. But on some of these things, is certain things not been found because they didn't look for it? Sometimes scientists might make assumptions and decide what to test for or not test for based on assumptions. Like assume there will be C14 because it's millions of years old according to them, and then not test it. He claimed the ice cores prove 800 or have 800,000 years in them. He claims that the Lost Squadron, which Kent Hovind has cited before, is not a good proof. And the Lost Squadron, for those of you who don't know, is a squadron of World War II military aircraft that was trying to fly from the United States of America or Canada to Europe to be a part of the war. And they didn't make it. They had a problem. They landed in Greenland on a glacier. The people eventually got picked up and rescued, but the planes, they couldn't rescue them. They just sat there. And then, was it 40 or 60 years later, a person who was rich and could afford to pay people to do stuff that, I couldn't afford to pay people to do. He wanted those airplanes, so he, tried to get them. They were not on top of the ice. If each layer of ice really meant thousands of years, or all the years that Alan Smith was claiming, then the airplanes would still be sticking up from the ice. But they weren't. They were like 200 feet down, if I'm remembering numbers right. Definitely they were deep down in the ice. They were dug out, and some of them are still flying now. They were able to be restored. But Alan Smith claimed an active glacier can't be used for ice core dating, or the ice cores there don't mean the same thing they do. He claims zircon dating is a reliable technique. Kent Hovind has made an analogy or this hypothetical story. If a ship sinks, don't try to find a sink that ships. But if a ship sinks and you swim down there and try to figure out how old that ship is, when you find a certain coin in that ship, you know the ship could not have gone down before that coin was made, if you know what time that coin was made. And Kent's point there is, once you get certain tests or evidences about the age of the Earth, that proves a certain age, and it can't be the other ages. that Alan Smith talked about the Yucatan crater and claims the asteroid that made it had to have been at a certain time because there are dinosaurs below it, and the sedimentary rock and the dirt. Kent Hovind accused Alan Smith of calling God a liar because God does not say billions of years. And God said that man brought death into the world, and man's sin brought death into the world, and not sin bringing man into the world. But according to Alan Smith's belief, the religion of evolutionism, billions of things had to die in the process of creating people, or bringing man into the world. Alan Smith claimed he never called Jesus a liar. He claimed the New Testament was not written by eyewitnesses and it was written decades later. And Kent Hovind quoted Romans chapter 5 verse 12, which says, "Wherefore, as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned." Okay, Alan Smith claimed that as a spiritual death and not the physical death, and so that's how Alan Smith reconciles that verse and still keeps the beliefs he has about the age of the earth and how people got here. Alan Smith's one evidence is in the account in the Bible of Adam and Eve. It says, "If you eat, you will surely die," and they didn't die right that day. Then Kent Hovind quoted Exodus chapter 20:11, where God says in 6 days, the Lord God, the commandment there, when explaining why we take the 7th day of the week off, said in 6 days God made heaven and earth, on the 7th day he rested. Alan Smith claimed it's not 24-hour days, and it's God's time scale, which could be different. And if the earth was made before the sun in the way that Genesis describes, the sun gives gravity to the solar system and it would cause problems, according to Alan Smith. But that doesn't bother Kent Hovind. And Alan Smith claimed without the sun, for that first couple of days of creation, there would be no gravity in the solar system, no heat, the whole earth would be frozen solid. Kent pointed out if the days of creation in Genesis are not literal days, then the plants would not have survived, because there are plants that need animals to pollinate, and there are plants that need the sun. And if the creation days in Genesis chapter 1 are literal days, that's a short enough time period for the plants to get by until they get sun the next day. Won't be a problem. And for animals that pollinate plants to come around a day or two, next day, or a couple days later. But if it's long periods of time, thousands or millions of years, the plants would have died from thousands of years without sun, or thousands of years without animals to pollinate them. Alan Smith said that it really doesn't matter because he quoted John 3:16, which says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoso believeth on him should have everlasting life." And that verse there says nothing about believing about the age of the earth. Yeah, good point, Kent Hovind. Accept that, yeah. Alan Smith made a big deal about Kent accepting Jesus Christ as a Savior, and was disturbed by Kent not accepting billions of years. Kent thinks Alan Smith should not use the word accept to describe what he believes about billions of years, because it hasn't been proven, and he should say believe. Yeah, but Kent questioned whether you can be intellectually consistent and believe that Jesus will save you, and believe Jesus can be trusted if Jesus lied about the beginning. And there is a verse where Jesus says, in the beginning of creation, God created man. Alan Smith pointed out other Christians, people can be Christians, there are Christians that believe like him about billions of years. And Kent Hovind said they just haven't seen his seminar. Maybe I'll do a video one time where I go through all the things Kent Hovind, you can expect him to say in every video. Alan Smith claimed John 3:16 is not Jesus' words because of his question about the authenticity of the New Testament. And he calls himself a Christian? Wow, confusing to me. Alan Smith pointed out, claimed that more Christians accept evolution than atheists. So what? Alright. Kent Hovind asked if his concerns, Alan Smith went through a list of, he went through a big list of evidences, but he gave summaries of it, didn't go into detail. But Kent asked if he could answer all of those concerns, would Alan Smith accept the 6,000-year-old Earth? And Alan Smith claimed it still wouldn't prove a 6,000-year-old Earth. Alan Smith obviously has some reason that he does not want to believe the age of the Earth that the Bible says. And, wow, it doesn't make sense to me but I would think as a Christian you would start off with that 6,000-year-old Earth, and even if you're convinced out of it by some evidence, fall back to that 6,000-year-old Earth, or 6,000 years since creation and the fall of Adam, if somebody was able to answer or explain, answer the reasons or concerns that you had that made you think it was not the 6,000 years. Kent Hovind talked about 5 samples of volcanic ash from Mount St. Helens were sent to 5 different laboratories, and it got a wide variety of different dates on them. Alan Smith gave a bad doctor analogy. But you see, your doctor, when you go to a doctor to figure out what's wrong with you, different doctors will end up with the same test results and the same conclusions. They're not going to come to wildly different conclusions like the laboratories that dated the ash from the volcano. And Kent Hovind told a story about some people who, their cat died, they buried it, and they were young, then they went to high school, then they went to university, got back from university, dug it up, and sent it to a lab. And they said the cat was very old. I forget the exact age. No, it was fossilized. It was fossilized bone. And that proves the labs can't be trusted, because they knew this cat was 8 years old, and the lab said it was a lot older than that. Alan Smith claims you can't fossilize in 8 years. Really? That's a stupid comment to make. If you get the right chemicals together, you can make certain things happen fast. And he made a big deal about no DNA in dinosaur bones. Kent Hovind talked about C14. And there's a volcano in Italy, Mount Etna, that erupted in 122 BC. We know it erupted in 122 BC because reliable records were kept of it. And those, the volcanic ash from that, or the volcanic rocks from that, were dated by the potassium-argon method to be 250,000 years old. Alan Smith accused Kent Hovind of not knowing what he was talking about, and Kent Hovind pointed out he's extremely familiar with these radiometric dating techniques. And Alan Smith claimed you can't use the potassium-argon technique outside of the window of 20,000 years and 4.5 billion years. It just won't work for that. But even if it doesn't work, it should still not give a wildly wrong answer. If I use my vehicle to measure something that's only this long, I'm not going to get a right answer, because it's not good for that short of a distance. But it's not going to say it's 20 miles long. Alan Smith was doing the equivalent of saying that that the reason well, my odometer does work in my vehicle, but imagine unreliable vehicle odometers. And you drive 5 feet and the odometer says that you drove 20 miles. Alan Smith is saying, well, yeah, see, you can't use the odometer for measuring something short like that. If you get in your car this morning, or tonight, or the next time you get into it, and you've just gone down the block and your odometer says you just went 20 miles, you're not going to trust that odometer, right? It's proved it can't be trusted to measure things. But apparently Alan Smith would still trust his odometer when he's, trying to measure how long he's driving on a family vacation, driving for hours. Even if it said he drove 20 miles when he went for a first block. Kent Hovind gave the candle analogy. If you walk into a room and there's a candle burning, and somebody tells you to figure out how long the candle's been burning, you won't be able to. You would need to make assumptions to do that. And then Alan Smith said you could measure the wax. Okay, so with the candle there is that potential way to measure it, but what if there was a dripless candle that completely disintegrates and leaves no wax dripping? But if there wasn't the wax there, and with dating of rocks and things like that, carbon-14 or uranium to lead, the uranium one to the different lead one, there's a radioactive version of lead, 200 and something, then 238 is the non-radioactive version. There's different versions of that. All those things are based on assumptions, is the point Kent was trying to make. You need to assume about what you started with. Assume a purity in the chemicals. Assume constant rate of change. And the candle, you would need to assume how tall the candle was to start. You wouldn't know just by looking at the candle. You wouldn't know by measuring how tall the candle is or how fast it's burning about how old the candle was. Kent Hovind pointed out that argon gas escapes, and Kent Hovind explained the assumptions that are involved in radiometric dating. They discussed decay rates and whether they change or not. Kent Hovind, Alan Smith might be a Christian, he claims to be, and Kent Hovind pointed out the Bible says 6,000 years. Alan Smith says, why did the church fathers not say so, or Newton? Kent Hovind called him out for a majority appeal to majority fallacy. Alan Smith accused Kent Hovind of not looking at all the sources. Accused Kent of going to the wrong people to find out about stuff. I made an analogy between going to your next door neighbor for surgery instead of a surgeon, but Kent Hovind does look into things. I think that Alan Smith was wrong in that accusation. Kent Hovind pointed out that in one test, large amounts of potassium were removed from rocks with just water poured on them. And if you remove the potassium, then you can't do the potassium-argon technique because you need to know how much potassium is there. And if some of it might have washed away, dead. Your dating method can't be used, proven unusable. Yeah. Alan Smith made a bad analogy about doctors and the KBS Tough. Kent Hovind pointed out when they did the KBS Tough, they found a human skull below it after they already decided a certain date. And that proved that wrong. Alright. And yeah, Alan Smith lied about one thing Kent Hovind says. Kent Hovind never says Mount St. Helens was like the biggest explosion in the world. He just says we can learn about how what happens when volcanoes erupt, about strata, about formation of canyons because a mini Grand Canyon was formed there. Alright, then they had their summary section. So Kent accused Alan Smith, or said Alan Smith claims the Earth is billions of years old. And Alan Smith wants to prove the Bible inconsistent, or the Bible's inconsistent. Alan Smith said, I said nothing about the Bible. People who think the Bible is 6,000 years old won't listen to the evidence for the old earth. But no, that's wrong. I'm willing to listen to evidence about stuff, including whether the earth is billions of years old. And Kent Hovind is willing to listen to evidence about whether the earth is billions of years old. I'm sure he is. Better figuratively. Oh, yeah. Alan Smith claimed you understand the Bible better if you look at it figuratively instead of literally. Kent Hovind went over the question again. If he could answer the reasons that Alan Smith gave for believing the earth is billions of years old, would he change his mind? And Alan Smith said no. Alan Smith claimed that Kent's making a false dichotomy. No, he isn't. He claimed that if Kent could actually prove the earth was young, that he would, or discredit the large numbers of evidences of billions of years old of earth, that Kent would get lots of Nobel Prizes. No, I don't think that would actually happen. Let's see. Kent Hovind asked if the world would be better if everyone in the world believed like you. Alan Smith didn't like that question. Kent Hovind asked if Alan Smith believed that things were here before people, like billions of years of death and evolution. And let's see. Alan Smith reiterated he believes the death that came into the world because of Adam eating the fruit is spiritual and not literal or physical. Or literally spiritual, maybe he would say. Kent asked if God created a world where lions were eating zebras, and he said it was very good. Then Alan Smith talked about how herds will overpopulate, and herbivores will overpopulate if there's no predation, if you don't cull the herd. Then he accused Kent of being a murderer if he eats animals, because Kent says it was better before the animals were eating each other. Kent Hovind pointed out that Alan Smith was missing the point. God said there was no death before sin. Evolution says millions of years of death before sin. Let's see. Kent Hovind accepted that some words might have a double meaning. And yeah, you point out there are many good books that answer Alan Smith's beliefs or claims and evidences, but Alan Smith won't read those books because he wants to believe the billions of years. Kent Hovind pointed out that science is a history of being dogmatic about wrong things. Like there was a doctor in the 17 or 1800s, fairly recently, was it 1600s, in Europe, who got fired from a hospital for demanding that his doctors wash their hands in between patients. Nowadays, you get fired if you do the opposite of that. But there was actually somebody who died in poverty. I think he might have ended up in an insane asylum. But he was right. The deaths at his hospital were lower than the other hospitals, and he still got canned because science does dogmatically hold on to false ideas sometimes. And Alan Smith refused to accept that fact. Kent asked again about proving millions of years wrong, if he could do that, if Alan Smith would believe the younger Earth. And Alan Smith said Kent Hovind has a steep hill there, metaphorical steep hill to get up to do that. So there's my summary of this debate, where Kent Hovind had better evidence, better logic, and Kent Hovind definitely won this one. You have a good day. Thank you for watching me. Alright, thank you for watching this amendum to a video. Amendment, addendum. When Kent Hovind debated against Alan Smith, the subject of how old things are came up. That was the whole point of their debate, is the age of the Earth. Alan Smith taking the billions or trillions, some really big number that's not true, number, and Kent Hovind taking the smaller number, the 6,000 years, young Earth. They were talking about radiometric dating. And in my previous video, I said a doctor analogy. Here's more specifically what Alan Smith was saying, and so Kent was pointing out that they don't accept all of the radiometric dates. How do they decide which ones to accept? If they like it, they accept it. They've got preconceived notions and opinions about what dates they are. And if it doesn't match, then they throw the date out. And how do I know this? How does Kent know this? Kent has a quote from a scientific journal that explains that. It says exactly that. And Alan said, well, if you go to the doctor and the blood test says you've got so extremely little or extremely lot of something in your blood that you should be dead because of those big numbers, but you're not, the doctor's going to throw out the test. That was a bad analogy. Here's why. The scientists doing the radiometric dating on rocks do not have another test that proves it. If you go to the doctor and the blood test says you have so little potassium or magnesium that you should be dead, or blood sugar, everybody needs some blood sugar. A diabetic body has lost control of their blood sugar. A non-diabetic's body, or non-hypoglycemic person's body, will control the blood sugar and keep it in that happy medium where you've got enough blood sugar, not none that you're dead, not too high that you get problems from that. But if you go to the doctor and there's a test that he does to you that shows that you should be dead already, the test says you should be dead, you should have been dead a long time ago, because you have a lot of something or none of something that you need. The doctor is basing that opinion about that chemical that you need on scientific evidence, on thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of laboratory hours and research and observation by doctors and medical researchers. But if a volcanic rock dates to the wrong date, there's not hundreds of thousands of hours of doctors and medical researchers or some equivalent thing that they can go to, or that a scientist, a geologist would be using to say, wow, that date can't be right because we have this other information, like your doctor would be doing if he said, that date can't be right because I have this other information. That low blood sugar should mean dead, and they're not dead. So there's something wrong with this test that shows zero blood sugar. And another way that analogy is weak is Alan Smith. He doesn't want to believe the dates that are in the Bible, but he claims, I think he claimed to be a Christian. One of his arguments was there are Christians who believe the billions of years and they're still Christians. And to the best of my knowledge, Kent's position on that is, yes, they are Christians, but they don't make sense. They're accusing God of lying in the beginning of the book, and that you can't trust the beginning of the book, but you can trust the end of the book. But Kent would still say somebody is a Christian if they believe Jesus for their salvation. So, that's that. But one weakness in the analogy is, if there was a test doctors were giving that was wrong as often as the radiometric dates are wrong for things, then the doctors would stop using that test. You know, it's not it's a proof of the weakness of a testing method if you can't trust the dates all the time. You know, laser rangefinders are a common technology now. Those things can be trusted, but if like 1 out of 5 times somebody uses a laser rangefinder, it gave you a wrong distance, people wouldn't be using them. So geologists, doesn't make sense if they use these methods that keep giving bad results. Now that's the thing I forgot to tell you in the step 1, part 1 of this debate review. Thank you for watching. You have a good day.